On today's episode of the Brain Health Kitchen podcast.
If you are making a mental health treatment plan and not including nutrition, you are not following the evidence-based guidelines, period. And so that's a really exciting thing to see shift. Now, college students eat more like a Mediterranean diet. They have a 30 to 50% reduced risk of depression over their college career. Like that's quite startling. If you run a college and you're worried about mental health, that directly impacts the food that you order for the kids at your school. So as you age, fewer connections. We know having few social connections, social isolation, dramatically increases the risk of future depression, but also in dementia.
Welcome back to the Brain Health Kitchen podcast. We are kicking off a powerful two-part series today, and joining me to introduce it is my co-host, Jenny Schilling. Jenny, our guest today, is a dear friend of mine, a fellow Jackson Hole local, and someone who is completely changing how we look at the brain-food connection, Dr. Drew Ramsey.
We are so excited to sit down with him. Drew is a board-certified psychiatrist, psychotherapist, and a true pioneer in evidence-based holistic and nutritional psychiatry. He's the founder of the Brain Food Clinic, a digital mental health practice, as well as Spruce Mental Health in Jackson, Wyoming. His latest book, Healing the Modern Brain, 9 Tenets to Build Mental Fitness and Revitalize Your Mind, lays out his framework for building mental fitness and supporting a healthier, more resilient brain.
Yes, I love his latest book, Healing the Modern Brain. And Drew and I actually go back over a decade to when we were some of the only doctors talking about brain food on social media. Now that we both live and practice in the same community, we finally get to collaborate on brain health in real life. So he's written foundational books like the international bestseller, Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety, which is now translated into 9 languages, and award-winning cookbooks like Eat Complete.
In this first episode, we're diving straight into the science that sparked that entire brain food movement, including the groundbreaking data on omega-3 fats and fish consumption. Annie and Drew also share the fantastic story of how a random Instagram DM over 10 years ago brought them together.
Yes, I always answer my DMs. Drew also shares the simple single question he started asking his patients about their daily food choices that completely transformed their clinical outcomes.
And later in the episode, Drew gets into something that feels incredibly relevant right now: doom scrolling, AI, and how the algorithm may be changing the way we seek pleasure, novelty, and connection. It's one of those moments that makes you think differently about what your brain is doing all day. Make sure you stay tuned until the very end of this episode, because Drew drops a unique list of success markers like boundaries, energy levels, and joy that will completely change how you measure your own health journey.
Let's dive right in. I am grateful to have 2 of the most trusted brands in brain health as founding sponsors of this podcast. First, we are proudly supported by NeuroReserve, a brain health nutrition company dedicated to bringing us high-quality, science-backed supplements, including Relevate, a brain-specific blend of omega-3 fatty acids, and Revanta, a pure-grade creatine. In fact, if I had to personally choose just 2 brain health supplements to take, it would be Relevate and Revanta. Learn more about their commitment to brain health at neuroreserve.com and use code BHKPodcast for 10% off. We are also proudly supported by Better Brain, the world's first brain health and dementia prevention program that's covered by insurance. They provide a brain health panel of over 50 markers, expert coaching, and a personalized action plan. Most people pay nothing out of pocket. Check it out at betterbrain.com/Annie. Hi, Drew.
Hi, Annie. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you too. I'm here with Dr. Drew Ramsey, and I'm so excited to connect with you for the podcast because it's been a while since we've sat down and chatted.
It's been a bit, and Annie, congratulations on the podcast. Everybody listening, I'm Dr. Drew Ramsey, and I recommend Annie Fenn and her podcast. This is a place to get great evidence-based information. And Annie, honestly, is one of my favorite content creators in the brain health space. So I'm just going to plug your podcast. Is the first thing I want to say on your podcast.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being here. I know you're so busy. So as I mentioned in the introduction, Drew is a psychiatrist. He sees patients. He's a pioneer in nutritional psychiatry. And I want to get into a little bit more about what that means. He's the author of 5 books. His last book, Healing the Modern Brain, was on my top list of brain health books in 2025. It's one of my absolute favorite books, not only that Drew has written, but that I've read about the topic of brain health. And so we have so much to talk about. The first thing I wanted to tell everyone in the audience is the story about how we met. We had been friends on Instagram like over 10 years ago. I discovered you on Instagram, and I was like, this is a psychiatrist who's talking about nutrition and brain food. And so I started like liking everything you posted and loving everything you posted and sending you messages. And back then, I don't know, 12, maybe 13 years ago, we were 2 of the only physicians that talked about food as part of brain health. And so I was like fangirling you. And then you were the one that sent me a DM on Instagram and said, hey, brain food buddy, I'm at the Jackson Hole Airport. Do you want to go skiing?
That sounds like me.
Which I like literally live 5 minutes from the ski area, and I like jumped out of my office and I put on my ski clothes and I met you out there. So yeah, thank you for reaching out. Fast forward, now Drew actually has moved from New York City, where he was practicing at Columbia, to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where we both live. So we get to be friends in real life too.
I remember first moving here, Annie, and you were one of the first folks who took me out on a mountain bike ride, and it's been really great settling here. And yeah, I love the fact that we get to meet up for coffee and talk all things brain health and brain food. It's just one of the absolute treats for me. I can't believe that I've ended up here in this community with you.
It's the best. It's the best. Okay, so first, I'd love to talk about the early days of nutritional psychiatry. I know some people out there may not have even heard this term yet, nutritional psychiatry, but you are one of the first people in your field to talk about the importance of food and mental health. And when was it that you started to think deeply about this connection?
Well, I want to open with the slide that I usually open with is a picture of our front field in Indiana, our farmhouse. My parents still live, looks out on a pond, and then it's a sort of big 9-acre field with a bunch of, apple and pear trees in the distance and big puffy white clouds. And in this picture, we're making hay with an old tractor. And for me, that's where nutritional psychiatry starts. My parents were part of the Back to the Land movement. They moved from New York City to very rural Indiana, Crawford County, Indiana. It's the greenest county in Indiana. It's also the poorest county in Indiana. And they wanted to homestead. They wanted to have a farm. They wanted to grow their food. And so really from a very early age, I saw this dream, this idea that so many Americans are embracing now, that if we connect with natural rhythms of health, natural healthy food from a farm, stuff that's not processed, if we swim in a pond and we sun ourselves, that there's some aspect of health that we can achieve that a lot of the modern world seems to be taking away from us. And then so fast forward, you take this kind of farm boy, and I go to Indiana University Medical School. After college, Earlham was a very Quaker school in Indiana, and it's one of these places very interdisciplinary. And so I got to do all kinds of things along with being a pre-med student. I got to be an athlete. I got to do theater. And I think as we're seeing a lot of times when your mind gets trained in these different fields, it does really great things for you later in life. For anybody who's listening, wondering how you end up as a nutritional psychiatrist, eat a lot, try a lot of foods, and do a lot of different things. But pre-med took me to med school at IU, and there I really fell in love with the relationship between a physician and a patient and all of the possibility that could hold, that the more closely I could listen, the better I could train, the more I could understand the research, the more of help I could be, and that was going to be a perpetual quest. Like you're never going to get there. You're just going to keep getting better. And so then I trained at Columbia as a psychiatrist, and Columbia is a very storied place in psychiatry. It's generally one of the top 2 or 3 places in the country in mental health. Some of the big research in our field, the DSM, how we diagnose people, came from Robert Spitzer was one of the main architects. Came from all of psychiatry, but uh, Bob Spitzer was on the faculty in there and kind of taught us all to do the mental status exam. And but nutritional psychiatry for me came from a set of data that came out when I was a resident starting in 2002. I noticed there was a lot of buzz about omega-3 fats, and it was interesting to me. We didn't connect omega-3 fats in fish. But omega-3 fats were like a pill that you took, first from maybe heart disease. There was a study, the first one that came out was a bipolar disorder, the rate of bipolar disorder in a country correlating with the consumption of fish in that country. I just thought it was like curious, like if that were true, and maybe it's true, it seems it's a correlation, but what would that mean? What would omega-3 fats be doing? And how do omega-3 fats affect mood anyway? And that just kind of led down one of my first internet rabbit holes of trying to understand things like omega-3 fats, which then led to looking at this like huge chasm in my education. I disagree with a lot of the popular notions that physicians don't get nutrition education. I think that's really ridiculous. I've got a year of biochem under my belt. I have studied a lot about how food and molecules work in the body, and also we know a lot about relationships and behavioral change.
Right. All those vitamins we talk about, those are cofactors in biochemistry.
Yeah, we study them. All that said, and physicians have a different role necessarily. I love it when physicians like myself and my colleagues have a few minutes to talk about food, but when you have 15 minutes with a primary care visit, there's a lot to pay attention to. I think there's an argument going on right now about how much nutrition education we need. Let's not get derailed on that. But
Right.
nutritional psychiatry came from a curiosity and seeing that we don't ask patients about food in mental health settings. That I was training at one of the top places, and there wasn't an emphasis on making sure I understood how do my patients move their bodies and exercise. There's a lot about understanding the relationship to their body and their body image, their self-esteem, their dynamics, all important stuff. But the basic of how you fuel the human brain was not included in a psychiatric interview, and it wasn't included in a treatment plan. And that is now different. If you are making a mental health treatment plan and not including nutrition, you are not following the evidence-based guidelines, period. And so that's a really exciting thing to see shift. But early on, it was like, it wasn't something that we talked about.
Sounds like growing up as a farm boy, growing your own food, having a hand in farm chores, it became part of who you are. I love how you talk about this in Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety, your fourth book, which has been phenomenally successful, translated into I don't know how many languages, but this is a book that everyone should have on their desk close by. But you talk about how when you started asking patients what they ate, just a simple, so what did you eat today question, the answers you got just really changed the trajectory of your practice.
Yeah, it revealed a few things. The first is how often we overlook some of the things right in front of us that are really important data. That we think what's so important is what we know and what we're exploring, things like dynamics and family history, which are very important, but there's sometimes a missing piece. I think the other thing that I noticed is it changed the feeling in the room. It surprised patients. I saw a lot of smiles, and everyone knows I'm an eater too. And in mental health, especially, we're taught to be pretty neutral. It's not that we don't, I'm fine you knowing about me. It's just like, that's not really what we're here to talk about. But as people talk about very personal things, they're curious. We're all eaters. We all struggle with food and food choice. We all go here in Jackson, it's great because I go to the same grocery store as all of my patients. So it's like, all right, head to that fifth aisle right there by the granola. You'll see what I'm talking about.
This brings back memories for me as well when we had one grocery store in town.
Yeah, it's a fun.
At least now we have 3.
Yeah, you bump into all the docs in the local community who are on Instagram. We all end up posting something like, here I am in my pajamas, bumping into patients at the grocery store. But, your question is
Yeah.
sort of the origins of nutritional psychiatry was being curious about this, seeing there wasn't a lot of information, partnering with a couple colleagues. Emily Dean should certainly get a shout out. She had the first blog, Evolutionary Psychiatry. Brilliant, wonderful Boston-based psychiatrist, good friend. Laura LaChance, who at that time was a resident, came up after their second or third presentation at the American Psychiatric Association and said, hey, I want to do this work. I want to work together. Let's think about a manual. Let's think about a food rating scale. And so I started getting a sense that people were excited. Even my most kind of deep science, genetic research, cell culture, nerdy PhD, MD friends, were encouraging of like, hey, this makes common sense. I also saw that people at this point, we're talking about like maybe 2004 when I finished residency, people were hesitant in the media to talk about mental health explicitly. And so these two things really came together, that the idea of nutrition and people caring about what they eat. And remember, this big transition happened where all of a sudden we started getting all these farmers markets. And I showed up to New York City in 2000, kind of anxious, from really rural Indiana. This is a fancy place. And it was lovely to be there in an era where all of a sudden people cared about farms. It was like kind of overnight, the restaurant scene made farm to table cool. And the idea that like I knew how to, I don't know, like drive a truck and a tractor and I don't know, like plant stuff. And so
Yes.
it was really wonderful to see, again, mental health coming to light, of people getting a little more interested in talking more in the public, and then food and where our food came from. And, more than the hippies cared about organic and coming from a farm. So this to me is a milieu for me where nutritional psychiatry really explodes. It's kind of mix of colleagues being supportive and caring, the APA letting us come in and talk about food and nutrition, seeing some of the early players in the space, like Felice Jacka, who I don't know, just has been a wonderful leader for all of us, but particularly encouraging to me. This is where and then wow, the research exploded. I mean, just like wow, it went from 2004, we're like, a couple studies, to we start getting tremendous amount of research with correlational data first, saying, wow, how college students eat a more like a Mediterranean diet, they have a 30 to 50% reduced risk of depression over their college career. Like that's quite startling. If you run a college and you're worried about mental health, that directly impacts the food that you order for the kids at your school, or it could, especially when it then gets
Yes. I
replicated.
learned about that trial from you, and I shared that with my college students this year in my brain health nutrition course.
I
And it's
love
really
that.
important to get that information out.
You put a little story up about that. And I love those moments where you see it starts as a lot of us having ideas about food and mental health. I'm certainly not the first person to have this idea. And then see the momentum that's gotten built, a whole brain food movement around the responsible use of nutrition in mental health and brain health settings to help our patients achieve great outcomes.
Yes, and I feel like we have parallel paths when it comes to this nutrition and brain health. You in the mental health world, me in the dementia prevention realm. And I also saw that all this scientific data was exploding, starting around 2010, really, and has really started to gel around scientific concepts that people can use in their everyday life to make their brain health better. So I've loved watching your journey over the years because it's based in science and it's highly relatable to a person-to-person level because, like you said, we all eat. We all eat.
And we all should
There's
love
simple things we
pesto.
can do.
And we all should love pesto, right? And lentils. I guess not to be oppressive.
Yes,
But
pesto.
there's certain foods that just I would say we agree on. I think that's the other things that shifted for me, Annie. Early in this world, there was a lot of like vegan versus omnivore. Then the carnivores came, and I think as I got older and I saw that, one of the things that separates me in the space is I just sit with patients more than most people. I don't know how many, like 40,000 hours. I just spend a lot of time sitting with people, with families, with family members of people I treat. And I really just love that work. But, you see that like, okay, like all the science comes down to some things that we agree on. Like I think pretty much everybody, carnivore to vegan, agrees that like dark berries are good for your health, mental health, and physical health. It's like, all right, check. And I've got kind of more interested in understanding those points of agreement, because I think when you see all the misinformation and friction, or all the misinformation, it creates a type of friction for people. You end up paralyzed. You end up with foods that tell you what they do as opposed to foods that you know what they do.
And this is what makes all the information you share so valuable on a completely different level, is that you are seeing patients every day in your office and taking care of people's mental health as a psychiatrist and following the research and writing books and papers about it. But you're there with patients every step of the way, which makes all of this information so much more relatable. Which brings us to your last book, Healing the Modern Brain. 9 Tenets to Build Mental Fitness and Revitalize Your Mind. This came out in spring of 2025, correct? You can see how many sticky notes, if you're watching the video of this podcast, how many sticky notes I have on this book because I go back to it again and again. It's basically a guide, a manual for mental fitness, right? Can you explain what mental fitness is and how you've kind of come to understand this term and how it applies to our brain health?
Yes, I'm just recovering emotionally for the moment of seeing the book with all the sticky notes because as you're writing a book, and I'm about to pull your book right off the shelf that I have here. Thank you for paying close attention to the book, and thank you everybody who's watching, who supported the book. Healing the Modern Brain is around trying to create structure like we have in our physical fitness for our mental fitness, that as we seek to have physical health and robust physical health, right? We want to increase our health span. Part of the reason that I'm in this community with Annie is my wife and I noted there were just a lot of really, really robustly active 70 and 80-year-olds in this community. I get passed on the trail regularly by gray-hairs, and I love it. It's amazing and it's inspiring. Mental Fitness is the first book I wrote here, and in some ways it was observing my own transition, moving from New York and then our farm in Indiana, and then from our farm to here, and just the number that did on my mental health and what I really needed to stay well. Nothing changed. I kept writing a book. I kept seeing all of my patients, but inside it was a very challenging time for me. And I wanted some things that I, again, could rely on, like those foods that we all know, like wild salmon. Everybody thinks wild, like anchovies, great. Broccoli, there you go, right? Stuff we could agree on beyond food. And I think part of working with patients is food is one part of my conversation. But probably my biggest skill is helping people create love in their lives. The outcomes, when people say, like, how do you measure outcomes? It's like smiles, weddings, babies, jobs, promotions, good choices, boundaries, sobriety. That's when you're a clinician. Those are the outcomes you're looking for.
I love that list. No one talks about that enough.
Well, in some ways, this is really where the mental fitness idea comes from is, as you're thinking like, great, you've got food dialed in and you're still really struggling with your character and how you engage and create intimacy. Or awesome, you're exercising all the time. And because of that, you don't have any time for your interpersonal relationships and to deepen them. And so, you're looking great on your feed, but your life is really lonely and empty. Remember when this trend started with all these men, like at 4:30 a.m., like putting their face in an ice bath and wiping the banana? The striking thing about those videos is there's no one else in them. There's no one else in that house. There's no one else in that gym. There's no one else in that bed. And that is a man that is set up for depression, addiction, and suicide. That is not a version of masculinity to aspire to. Don't get me on a masculinity kick here. So
No, we're going to talk about mental health.
mental fitness is like the structure, like, hey, what are the buckets we all agree on? Sleep. Everybody listening, you all know, if you slept well last night, I slept so well last night. I'm dreaming again, Annie. Oh my gosh. It's like my sleep is back on point. I'm so happy.
I'm so happy to hear that because you were struggling with insomnia, weren't you?
I was having that bad andropause middle of the night, like scratch the sheet, like bad dark thoughts, insomnia. So many of you listening have that. And I have, again, from being a clinician and then going through it, you just have a different set of tips. You have a different set of ideas. I'm not interested in saying, hey, sleep hygiene, like 8 hours, like that doesn't do anything when you're a clinician, because when you're a clinician, you need to like get the boat of your therapy up to the patient's dock, and they get in and you go someplace they've not been before. You have ideas that haven't been talked before. There's this great psychoanalyst, Otto Kernberg, and he has this quote, psychotherapy begins where friendship ends. And the idea for those of us in clinical practice is to challenge ourselves to do more than simply be of kind, caring support. We'll do that for sure, but what's that next level of understanding? So mental fitness revolves around things we agree on, like sleep, nutrition, and movement, and sharing the data of how that affects brain growth, inflammation, and the microbiome, these real central pillars of how we understand modern mental health and modern psychiatry, and things that have been left out in a lot of ways. When you're talking about depression and anxiety, you should be having part of that conversation be about plants and fermented foods, because those are the biggest levers when it comes to influencing the microbiome over time and creating a healthy routine and set of healthy habits for an individual. So mental fitness are these like buckets that I want you to invest in every week. A great day and a great activity is where you're stacking these tenets of mental fitness, right? So the first is self-awareness. So if I'm going to take a hike with my journal in the big nature, right? So then we have the tenet of movement. I've got the tenet of grounding, which is about getting out in big nature. And I'm with a friend maybe. Wow, we're doing like several of these 9 tenets at once. But the book tries to walk people through of how they exist, how they stack on each other. I don't really want you to thinking about your life purpose in any way at all until you have your nutrition, your movement, and your sleep dialed in. Because whatever you're feeling, whatever you're thinking, it is just not based on good data. You're stressed, you're overwhelmed, you're not self-aware, you don't have good connections. Yeah, that's not where you understand the best of who you are and why you are here. That's as I tell my patients a lot of times, like we're seeking to float up here in the psycho-spiritual plane, right? This is where we create love, we're creative, we create connection. This is the best of who we are. But so often we're down here. We're debating about carnivores and keto and protein powders, and we're debating about all these things that don't allow us to transcend and resonate where we belong. And that's what mental fitness at the end of the day really hopes for and hopes to give people more of a roadmap for.
I love it. It really is a roadmap. And let's go do a quick overview of the 9. I have them here, so you don't have to remember them. And
I can
I
remember.
know when I was on book tour with my book and I wrote a lot about the 10 brain healthy food groups, I always got really anxious when people asked me to list them because I always would leave one out.
I appreciate that. I used to have the list of all 9, but I think I can remember. Let's go through.
Okay, let's go through the list, and then I'd like to go deeper into a couple of these, especially the ones that, like you just explained, are so interrelated.
And everybody listening, I just want you to, for 1 second, just try and think, beyond the obvious ones, right? That, what are the ones that come to your mind that keep your mental fitness most in check, your mental health, like that, you can go to and you're going to get some, just relief from anxiety or worry. I just want you to call that because I want to see if they match. Okay. All right. Now let's get into it.
Okay. Self-awareness, like you mentioned, nutrition, movement, sleep, connection, engagement, grounding, unburdening, and purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So I can already see some overlap here. Like, let's look at connection and engagement. How are those the same? How are those different? How did you make those 2 separate tenets?
Connection is about seeing how my patients, as they return from a state of illness, a lot of times mental health illnesses involve isolation. We separate from friends. We don't return texts. We go to an inpatient unit and we're gone for 30 days and people don't know why. And so as people return to health, you see them get curious, their heads sort of perk up, and they want to engage with people almost universally. They want to have a sense of structure in their lives. They want to see some productivity and some work. So connection for me was trying to help people, trying to take what I see happen in clinical practice, which is clinicians, you try and see where the kind of the web of connection and where there are opportunities, like relational potential is what I call it. And so connections are about the people in your life, obviously, but thinking about the different roles that people play for us. There are our family and our friends. There are also our mentors. I saw a great post from a mental health influencer I love. I've gotten to spend some time with Keir Gaines. And he had this great post where it showed him kind of doing all these house chores, listening to his headphones. And he's talking about so many of his greatest mentors he's never met. That they're men that he listened to. He hears their word. He listens to them and is inspired. So connections are people in your life, some people that you maybe aspire to be more like. They're institutions, which is, I think, something right now that people tend to miss. Having obligations to the institutions that trained me, that supported me, is a big part of my motivation. Having institutions here in town like Teton Youth and Family Services, where it helps me connect, and be of service here in a way that is different than being a clinician. And then I think also, this. So I think engagement, I feel, is a little different, because engagement to me is where you fight the algorithm. That engagement is around the notion that I get served up, for example, a lot of extreme ski and snowboard and avalanche content because I live here and I probably watch it a little bit and my eyeballs
Me
like it,
too.
right? But that's not really what I need more of in my life. And the more I can unfollow that stuff and the more I really like it when my feed is full of, again, the psycho-spiritual stuff, good science and research, which to me is very spiritual, and very fulfilling and kind of the best of who we are and how our minds work. Good connections with human beings, again, creating love, being creative. And so engagement, you don't find that in the algorithm, right? The reason we don't call it joy scrolling for a reason. We call it doom scrolling because at the end of it, you don't look up an hour later and be like, heart is full. Oh my gosh, heart is so full. You're like, ah.
And doom scrolling is bad for the brain, right? Do we have data on this?
I
I
think
mean,
we
we all
have
know
data
it
on
to be
this. I
true.
mean, I think there's a variety of data coming out in the cognitive science world about how both AI and an algorithmic life disrupt processes that we've always depended on. They disrupt the way that our brain creates goals. And, dopamine isn't about pleasure. Dopamine is about completing things. Dopamine is about seeking and about wanting and hoping and aspiring. And so when it's delivered to you, and when it's delivered to you in a way that's kind of stereotyped, it constricts your experience of pleasure. It doesn't allow what actually gives us dopamine pleasure often, right? New things, unexpected things, connections with people. So I think that the engagement overlaps, as you're noting, that you need connections. And then on the engagement side, you need to be active in them these days. We all have seen the quality of our connections degrade, right? There was COVID, and then there was that bump. I saw so many people, myself, patients, friends, and those first social things after COVID being like, this is strange, this is weird. So we've clearly recovered from that in certain ways, but in other ways, people haven't because the overlap of COVID and the rise of social media and the rise of food delivery, you just don't need people in the same way that you did. You
And it
can't.
strikes me how this correlates with dementia prevention too, because we know that social isolation and loneliness, especially in our elderly population, increases the risk of dementia.
Oh,
Even
totally.
the Lancet Commission.
Yeah, I've been working. There's a local amazing music therapist here in Jackson, Hillary Camino. Actually, wherever you are, you'll see there's a PBS special about her in Wyoming that's going national. But she works at one of our residential homes here at Sage Living, which is for the elderly and the ill who need longer term care. And she's a music therapist. And when you look at her therapy room, and I compare that to what happens like sitting with the patient, I have a lot of fun with my patients, but we're not singing, we're not creative, we're not connecting and engaging in this way that Hillary gets with the music. So, but the dementia prevention and depression prevention, right? Because there's this
Mhm.
really strong. The more depressed you are, and the longer you're depressed, the much more likely you are to get demented. And some of the reasons for that are very clear. When you're more depressed, you're going to have poorer nutrition. You're going to have lower B12. Right, that can cause depression. Well, everybody with low to lowish B12 has a smaller brain as they get older. It's just kind of a universal finding. When you're depressed, not as connected, not as engaged, not as buoyant, you don't plan as much, you're not as active, you don't have much energy. So as you age, fewer connections. We know having few social connections, social isolation dramatically increases the risk of future depression, but also in dementia. And so that's where, again, connection and engagement is really asking us. I mean, me too. I have a real problem with Instagram. I will be in my house with my kids, like as I call it, in the pocket, right? Like everybody, it's warm, there's yummy food. Everybody just wants to like make music, talk, do homework. It's lovely. And I'm looking at like Instagram. Like what? That is just, I mean, you work your whole life to create a home and then just scroll it away. Like I said,
Very, very compelling, and it feeds something in the brain, some sort of dopamine hit or something that, it's like maybe we're just always looking for a faster reel or some motion that is like
it's,
life is slow and
yeah,
Instagram is
well, that's
fast.
it. I think it promotes selfishness and I think it
Mhm,
promotes impatience and I
mhm.
think it promotes having a lack of curiosity because you don't need one anymore because the algorithm serves you up something that's real tasty. And I think this is one of the challenges that gets missed. And we're having a lot of conversations right now about like, is it addictive? And I don't think it's the right question. It's missing what it actually does to our brain. It's different than drugs. It's different than drugs. Drugs change how you think because you become fixated on one thing. The algorithm and AI change how you think, period. Right? It's a larger, more global effect on how you engage with your cognition, with your emotions, and with other people. And so that's where, not that I want to be against all of the good stuff. Wow, social media, if you have bipolar disorder and you want to connect with people who have bipolar disorder, talk about it, maybe inspire you, thousands of people who are wonderful influencers online who are full of great information are available to you now. So, lots
So,
of it.
how would you describe a brain healthy strategy for dealing with social media input?
Yeah.
Which is all this is totally pertinent to healing the modern brain. This is a modern times problem.
Yeah, in Healing the Modern Brain, just to set the book up a little bit for everybody, I go into what I mean by the modern world and what are the direct challenges to your mental health that you're facing that you might not be aware of. And people aren't aware. We're talking about all this ultra processed food. Ultra processed foods, if you eat like the most of them in the highest, what we call like 20%, you have a 60% increased risk of depression. Like Nurses Health Study 2, great research. Right? So, if you don't have a hobby, you increase your risk of depression by, I think, 30%. If you don't exercise, all these things that we do to increase the risk of depression, dementia, anxiety that we often hear in terms of physical health, but the real impact to us in our lives is the mental health impact. Right? It's where people get confused about longevity and the concerns of mortality. And that's a really like foolish endeavor. You really want to be focused on mental fitness right now because mental fitness is about enjoying today. And it's about enjoying today in a way that likely is going to lead to you enjoying tomorrow and you enjoying your 80s, hopefully, knock on wood, fingers crossed. But what people are missing right now is the top cause of disability, us not being our best selves, me not being the best husband, best dad, best psychiatrist that I can be. The top cause of that in my life is going to be mental health concerns. Population wise, it's depression, anxiety, suicide, alcohol use disorder. That's what's causing us problems as a country. And that's what's the main sort of drivers in some ways of, again, disability, us not being the best that we can be. And so the engagement and the connection and the idea of mental fitness are really to try and get at some of the root causes of this for people and empower you. It's a very empowering book. Empower you to have a structure and a system and some discipline around providing this for yourself. And the motivation, I hope, is clear. It's because I need you. We all need you. We do. We need your best self. We do not need more of what we have right now. Stressed, exhausted, doom scrolling, not sleeping, not eating the right foods, not connecting, feeling isolated, not having a sense of purpose, and being filled with trauma. It's like we need to do better, all of us.
And Drew, something you said when you were speaking in public here in Jackson years ago really struck me. You said that 1 in 5 people struggle with their mental health, but 5 out of 5 of us have mental health. And I think that if you have never had a mental health challenge like depression or anxiety or OCD or something like that, it ends up being put in that other category. But in reality, that 1 in 5 could be any of us at any time throughout the course of our lives.
Yeah, it's where I really like that other aspect, that view that I bring to it, that you don't need to have a diagnosis for us to have a very healing conversation, that everyone can have a good conversation with the psychiatrist about their inner world and their mental health, and it will benefit you. And I think that really gets missed about my field. People think about psychiatry as, oh, I'm here to like diagnose you and give you pills or shock therapy. And it's just so much misinformation and stigma about my field. Psychiatry is about living a productive and loving life and helping whatever is in your way. And so that 1 out of 5, I think it's important to note that's every year, right? I mean, would you take those odds? No. After 5 years, 10 years, after 20 years, a 1 in 5 chance. You don't think you had a little something? Especially if you're a man listening to this, 1 in 2 of us has a substance use disorder, lifetime prevalence, 50%. And so if
Wow.
you're thinking it's not going to be you, that one of these things, and I'm not trying to say everyone has a mental health disorder. I'm trying to say that human existence in the modern world is filled with challenges that cause mental health disorders. right? Whether it's moral injury or whether it's trauma or whether it's, again, all of the horrible food that we get marketed or all of the distractions in social media, like mental health challenges are coming for you. And I think what's getting missed sometimes in this like mental health awareness and wellness movement is the seriousness of what I'm talking about. People are debating like alkaline water and oxalates, and it just, like, for those of us in the clinical space, your head wants to explode. Like,
Right.
stop arguing carnivore versus vegan. People are dying, and that's not the solution.
Right. So let's go on to unburdening, because this is one that
I'm
maybe
unburdening here, clearly. My agitation. Yeah, sorry about that, everybody.
which was a that was a great example of unburdening, because it's frustrating when we see where the focus is in wellness and medicine and brain health in general. Brain health is very trendy now. Both of us cared about it years ago when nobody cared about brain health, and now everyone's talking about it. But with that, it's frustrating to see where the focus has lied. So how does unburdening work into me cultivating my mental health?
Unburdening tries to acknowledge that we have all experienced some very challenging times that shape us. Sometimes these elevate to a level of trauma. And I see a lot of people in the trauma world debating like big T trauma, like assault and rape, and little T trauma, like, I don't know, maybe identity theft. And when you're in my role, like right over there's my couch and you're sitting with patients, that's not how it sounds. It's devastating. And unburdening is around asking people to not live a life where the hand on your steering wheel is the hand of trauma, that your relationships are around trauma bonding, that your experience in the outside world is shaped by not who you are today, all the strength and power and knowledge and skills you bring, but something that happened to you a long time ago that has its claws in you, that is in your nervous system in a way that is challenging you. Um, I came into this world in an milieu of trauma. Where people, I don't think, know about this. Right before I was born, 3 weeks before I was born, a giant tornado hit my house. My mom was pregnant with me. She was in the basement. She looked up and she looked into the tornado, and everything around her just floated up and went away.
Oh my gosh, Indiana. Wow.
Indiana. And so trauma has always shaped my life. Every time there's a storm, for my mother's entire life, it's activated a horrible PTSD in her. And so how we unburden, how we process that, how we connect with other people if you've been victimized, how you connect with people and create community, how you recover, that's obviously different for all different types of trauma and different situations. But unburdening is really asking people to honor that and to sit with it and then to do something about it. And for some people, that means going to therapy. For some people, that means volunteering. For some people, that means more exercise in a certain way. For some people, that means pelvic floor therapy. There's all kinds of different ways and different types of trauma. I don't in any way want a little chapter in a book to belittle it. I think it was more understanding that, and it's right there before purpose for a reason, that where we have a sense of really being like in the world, like up here again, psychospiritually, and I think kind of what I call like kind of clean, in the sense that we've dealt with our stuff, right? I'm not making decisions because I got bullied. I'm not making decisions because I had some inappropriate mentors, right? I'm making decisions based again on my values, my mental fitness, the kind of sanctity of my mind that I've worked on. And for a lot of us, that requires some unburdening, a fair amount for a lot of people. And so I think also just sitting with patients, and this book is really from my patients. It just comes up so much. I remember sitting with a woman a long time ago. I smiled because she came in and she had lost her dog. And you and I both have dogs, love animals. And she was devastated. She was devastated for like months. And she said, "Ugh, this isn't normal." And I said, I mean, I appreciate you saying that. It was your dog, but I also don't think that's very healthy. It's really painful. It's maybe lasting just a little bit longer than you like, but you're really strongly connected, and it's a horrible loss. And so, whether it's grief in a way that people struggle to mourn and move on, or again, whether it's trauma from your childhood, it's just my encouragement
Mm-hmm.
that I think so often we isolate and we kind of, how like we deal with TB, that like we wall it off in our lungs. So it's still in there. It's just like, it's in prison. I think sometimes We do that with trauma. It gets locked away, and we think that that means, we've dealt with it, as opposed to weaving it into our narrative as best we can.
And it sounds like people may have had adverse childhood experiences, and then it goes into adulthood. It informs how you react to stress. It informs relationships. Although people don't always recognize that this adverse childhood thing that happened was actually a type of trauma. So recognition is part of it too, then it sounds like.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing out that up in the book, and it's sort of how healing the modern brain works. I want to talk about clinical experience and how this really sounds in an office, but then I want to guide people through some of the science that exists. So ACE, the Adverse Childhood Experiences, was an early rating score system that was developed, and the team that developed it kind of put it out there as sort of self-report and just got really high rates back. And they were looking at things like think about it as traumatic, but from a psychological and developmental standpoint, is you have a parent with a substance use disorder, right? So even in control, your dad's just like a mean alcoholic, just a few nights a week, really drunk. Right? So that is an adverse child experience. Your parents have a messy, violent divorce. There's a severe medical illness in your family, right? These things that, again, we don't have full control over, often no control, but influence our childhood and cause it not to be the safe, calm, loving, curious, learning place that we hope that childhood could be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that chapter is so powerful and pertinent to absolutely every single person, even if they don't think they ever had anything like that happen to them. I'm so glad it made your tenets. I'm glad it made your tenets. Before we wrap up part one of our conversation, I want to come back to one idea we touched on, unburdening. Because what that really means is recognizing how our past experiences, especially from childhood, can shape how we think, feel, and respond, and begin to process and release some of that over time. And when you put that together with other tenets, sleep, movement, connection, purpose, it really starts to form a complete picture of how we support our mental health. Stay tuned for a preview of the second part of my conversation with Dr. Ramsey after Jenny and I do our takeaways from part one. And now I'm joined by my co-host and producer, Jenny Schilling. Jenny, I know you were taking notes, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts on what Drew had to say about mental fitness. I am just so glad we're talking about mental health as part of brain health. So what are your takeaways from part one of our interview?
Well, what really stayed with me from this conversation with Dr. Ramsey is that mental fitness is something we can build. Our mood, focus, resilience, sense of well-being are shaped every day by the basics. How we sleep, how we eat, how we move, how we manage stress, and how connected we feel to other people. And these areas don't operate independently. When we strengthen one, we often make the others easier to support too.
Yeah, I love how Drew really does touch on the basics. So much of what we share in Brain Health Kitchen on this podcast is not about trendy new biohacks for your brain health. It's really about coming back to these basics that are so well studied.
Yeah. Another thing that stood out to me was how central nutrition is to brain function and mental health. The brain is one of the most metabolically active organs in the body. It depends on a steady supply of nutrients like omega-3 fats, minerals, phytonutrients to support mood, focus, and resilience. When you think about how much energy the brain uses up, of course, our food impacts our mental health. Of course it does. So this is a biological system, not just a mindset.
Love that. Love that.
And we talked about attention as a resource, where you direct your attention throughout the day, whether it's towards people, towards your work, towards digital distraction. That shapes how connected and present you feel.
Yeah, and that's so timely right now. Everyone's attention is being vied for by so many multiple directions.
Yeah. Yeah, because that distinction between connection and engagement really stood out to me. So you could be around people, but that's not the same as feeling connected. And, engagement means being present, listening, and participating in a way that actually strengthens relationships. Another takeaway I had was that mental fitness is trainable. You don't need to overhaul your entire life. Small, consistent behaviors repeated over time can meaningfully shift how you feel and function.
I love that. And I love how Drew breaks it down, he makes it feel doable, especially with his latest book, in terms of having areas that you can work on as you just really try to cultivate a life that nurtures your mental fitness.
Right. And he gives us real reasons why we want to do this and that you'll feel better. If you try a couple of these things, you will actually feel more connected to your loved ones, more connected to your work. So you should feel results pretty quickly.
And that's the great thing about it. It's all
Mhm.
evidence-based.
Yeah. Well, give us our to-do list. What should
Okay.
we work on?
Well, here are a few simple ways to start putting this into practice. Number 1, take a quick mental fitness inventory. How are you doing with sleep, movement, nutrition, and connection right now? Number 2, choose one area to focus on this week. Don't try to do everything at once.
Yeah, that's good advice.
3, notice your engagement. When are you reaching for your phone instead of reaching out to a person? Next, build one small moment of real connection into your day, a walk, a call, or a shared meal.
Yeah, I like that idea that a connection can be you on a walk with yourself, connecting with nature or just talking to yourself in your own head.
Like Barbie Bowles taught us
Like Barbie.
in the
I
last
love
episode. Okay, and lastly, if something from your past still feels present, just start by noticing it. Awareness is the first step toward unburdening.
Annie, what do we have to look forward to in part 2 of your interview with Dr. Drew Ramsey?
In the next episode, we get into one of the most practical and powerful ways to support your mental health, what you eat, and how to actually make it work in real life. We talk about the antidepressant food scale, what the research shows in young adults, and why even small shifts in how you eat can meaningfully improve mood. But we also go beyond the science into how to apply this in a way that's realistic, whether you're feeding yourself, your family, or a college student living on takeout. We'll cover omega-3s, the gut microbiome, and how to think about building a brain-healthy plate without overcomplicating it. You're not going to want to miss part 2 of our discussion with Dr. Drew Ramsey. I write about brain-healthy eating every week. I talk about it on this podcast, and I wrote the book literally on brain-healthy cooking. But it wasn't until I went through the Better Brain program that I made important changes to what I was doing day to day, like a B vitamin absorption issue I never knew I had, and a slight uptick in my cholesterol, to name a few. Now I'm already starting to see improvement in my brain health biomarkers, thanks to our founding sponsor, Better Brain. They provide a science-backed brain health lab panel and expert coaching. Most people pay $0 out of pocket for these sessions. Check it out at betterbrain.com/Annie and build your personalized brain health action plan covered by insurance. I'd also like to thank NeuroReserve for being a founding sponsor for this podcast. Check out their brain health nutritional products like Relevate, Brain Health Kitchen Extra Virgin Olive Oil, and Revanta Creatine. I've known the NeuroReserve team for many years, and I also use their products as part of my own brain health care routine. So go on over to neuroreserve.com and use code BHK podcast for 10% off. The Brain Health Kitchen podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. The content shared on this podcast, including conversations with guests, is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Brain Health Kitchen podcast or its hosts.